Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to do a follow-up video on range estimating with the naked eye. Okay, so we don't have a rangefinder, we don't have an optic that allows us to measure, we don't have measuring tape. What we do have is our buddy, right? So we tell our buddy to go downrange, and this is a situation I've been in many times where I'm basically shooting in an open field that's not marked. Okay, so I'll tell my friend go downrange, set up the targets at random distances, right? And without a rangefinder, it's like, okay, where is he setting up? What distance is he setting up the targets at this, in this huge field that we're in? So I actually got this idea from a guy called Shrek. His channel is called Sheriff of Baghdad. This is where I initially got the idea. I will put a link to his video below. Definitely recommend you guys check out the original source of this information. Check out his channel. He's got lots of great information over there. But the important thing here is I had to take his information and make it work for me, right? So I had to actually go out to a populated area. I recommend you go to a tourist area, right? Because you can go to a tourist area with a rangefinder, and you're gonna have lots of people that you can look at, and because it's a tourist area, people are taking, videos and pictures. You're not gonna look too strange, looking through a rangefinder, which kind of looks like a little camera, right? So that's a good way for you to practice your range estimating. Okay. Like I said, situation I've been in many times. Told my friend to go out, put targets at random distances out into the distance, and now we gotta try and figure out what distance we're shooting at, so that we can have the proper holdover. Okay, now the hold, normally with my ARs I use a 50-yard zero, which gives me a second zero at 200 yards. So from zero distance out to 250 yards. Basically, I can put, let's say, the dot right here in the center, right? And I know I'm going to be either 4 inches high or 4 inches low. So from zero distance out to 250 yards, just put your dot in the center of the target, and you should be able to hit it. Now, the question or the issue becomes once you get out to 300 yards, 400 yards, 500 yards, right? Because at 300 yards, I got to put my dot here, so the bullets will drop about 10 inches into the chest. Okay. At 400 yards, I need to put the dot on top of the head, so the bullets will drop into the chest. And at 500 yards, I basically have to cut the man in half. So I take the distance from the belt to the top of the head, and basically that's my holdover over his head in order to drop the bullets into the chest area. Okay, but okay, fine. Those are the holdovers, right? But how do you know? What the distance is? Okay, so you got your friend out there. You're looking at him. And at different distances, you're gonna be able to see different things. Okay, so when your friend is at 50 yards, you will be able to see the T box. You'll be able to make out a T in his face. I mean, if he's at 30 yards, again, now this is specific to my eyes. Your eyes might be different. You might have better eyes. You might have worse eyes, whatever. But for me, I have observed that when a person is out to about 50 or 60 yards, I can see the T of their face, okay? Which also tells me that at 50 yards, they are within my max pistol shooting capability, right? Because here, I typically shoot my pistol, the longest that I typically shoot my pistol at is at about 65 yards. Sometimes I'll play around with 75 yards. But 50 yards, I know that I can hit no problem, right? Especially at a man-sized target. So if I can see the T box, right? If I can see the T of the face, I know that somebody is within my pistol shooting capabilities. Okay, so that's 50 yards. 50 yards, I want to see the T box or the face. Again, you may not see the distinguishing features of the face, but you'll be able to make out a T. Okay, at 200 yards, the T disappears, and all I see is kind of like a plain face. Okay, now when I was first collecting this information, right, I was able to look at light-skinned people, and I could clearly see the plane of the face, out to about at 200 yards. But then the question becomes, what if somebody's dark-skinned, right? So I had to play around with this a little bit, and what I realized is that even if somebody is dark-skinned, you'll still be able to notice, right? Well, I will still be able to notice, because this is calibrated to my eyes, that there's still enough surface area over here for a face to be on. So even though I can't see the face, again, you might be in shadows, right? Because when I was doing this, it was against a background that I could see. This might change a little bit with the background. If somebody's in the woods over here, it might appear a little bit different. But even if you cannot see the face, at 200 yards, you will be able to see that there's enough surface area there for a face to be on. By contrast, when you are at 300 yards, all you're going to see is a little pinhead. Okay, so at 300 yards, you're going to see a pinhead with a line underneath it, right, for the body, and then you'll see the legs, and you'll be able to see the space between the legs, right? You'll be able to see the light between the legs. But the distinguishing feature is here that you're going to see a pinhead at 300 yards, or I'm going to see a pinhead at 300 yards, and there's absolutely no way that I could see a face on that. Okay, so that's the difference between 200 yards and 300 yards. 300 yards, I just see a pinhead. No possibility, regardless of skin color, there's no possibility I could possibly see a face on that. Okay? Now, when we get to 400 yards, the head disappears. So at 400 yards, all I'm seeing is the space between their legs. Okay, so I can see a stick like that, and they might be walking, right? And so you might see that light flickering on and off, but you're seeing that light between their legs. Okay, and at 500 yards, everybody looks like a little line to me. Okay, all right, so this is what people look to me. All right, to my eyes. Now your eyes, like I said, might be better, might be worse. You got to go out with a rangefinder and look at people at these distances and see what they look at you. Now, this information here should stay the same. It's just a question of at what distances do the yardages change, right? Because for you, this might be 100, that might be 300. So the question for you is, right, this information will be the same. What are these numbers? What are the yard numbers going to change to for you? Okay, so basically, you're looking for T-box, no face or plain face, basically a pin dot on top of a little body with legs. Okay, just legs, right? Just the light between the legs, or just a little bit of line here. Okay, now when Shrek did his video, right, the way he did it is that he could see face all the way out to 100 yards, right? So clearly he's got better eyes than I do. Okay, at 200 yards, he's no face, right? So the face disappears. At 300 yards, no hands, so the hands disappear, or the arms. For me, when I went out there, I couldn't, it might be because of the time of year, everybody was wearing coats. I couldn't see arms at any of the, or at the distances that I could see hands and arms. I could see the plain face, so it was just a lot easier for me to work with that than try to work arms into this. So, but for him, at 300 yards, the hands disappear. At 400 yards, the head disappears. At 500 yards, there's no light between the legs, right? So the light disappears. At 600 yards, people look like little triangles to him. Okay, so he sees triangles where, so obviously he's going all the way out to 600 yards. I was only able to go out to 500 yards, right? So again, you got to calibrate it to you. Also, the way I tend to think more in positive rather than know this, know that, know that. So it's just easier for me to remember. So for me, it's like 50 yards T-box, 200 yards plain face, 300 yards a pinhead, 400 yards light between the legs, 500 yards I just see a line. Okay, so that's a little easier for me to remember. Now the nice thing about the 300 yards, and it's because remember, I mean, this stuff's, I've done lots of videos, lots of details. The thing, if I can't remember anything else, right, the thing that I'm going to remember the most is at 300 yards, I'm just going to see a pinhead. And that tends to work really good for me, because at 300 yards, the holdover is I put the dot on the pinhead so I can drop into the center, into the body, right? So at 300 yards, it's just convenient for me that all I see is a pinhead, put the dot on the pinhead so I can drop the bolt into the body area. Okay, and lots of targets that we shoot at, right, they're like silhouettes of people, right? So this, you know, depending on your target, if you have a man-sized target or a man-shaped target when you go to the range, you know this will work really good with that. So conveniently, like I said, for me, it's like my holdover at 300 yards is the face, and at 300 yards, I see a nice little pinhead that I can hold on. Right, I can put the dot right in the center of that and drop them into the body. At 400 yards, I'm essentially creating the head. Okay, so I'm going to see this line with the two little legs. I'm going to take my red dot and I'm going to make a head on top of this line over here. All right, so that's where my my hole's going to be, right at the top of this line over here. And at 500 yards, I'm going to take that line, cut it in half, and that right there is where my hole's going to be, right? So you can see there's a space between the top of that line and where my dot would be. Okay, now the other thing I noticed while I was out there is I was looking at buildings, planes, ships. I wasn't looking at the planes and ships on the same at the planes on the same day. I did that on a different day. But one of the things that I've noticed is large objects really distort your sense of distance. Okay, so I was looking at these ships that were in the harbor, and you know, like I just, you know, as soon as they came into view, I took a quick guess of what I thought it was, and I was guessing like 300-400 yards. When I put the rangefinder on it, it was like 1,000 yards. Okay, so the problem that I found is I'm looking at the entire ship. Well, when I was by the airport, I'm looking at the entire airplane. Okay, or if I'm looking at buildings, we tend to look at the entire building. Rather than do that, just look at the doors, right? Because buildings, airplanes, ships, they're all gonna have doors size for a man to walk through, right? So most doors are about 80 inches tall. So at 200 yards, right, where I'm looking at buildings, planes, or ships, at 200 yards, I can clearly see what appears to be a door to me, right? It looks, you know, I can see there's plenty of space. Now remember, doors come in different colors, so that it can really, the colors can kind of throw you off a little bit. So you're gonna have to get used to like how much space you're gonna see between the edges of the door. Okay, at 300 yards, there's very little space between the edges. Okay, and at 500 yards, there's almost no space to me when I look at it. Okay, so it's something to play around with as well. With your rangefinder, go out to places, look at how doors appear to you at different distances, right? And then commit that to memory. But especially like with ships and airplanes and buildings, which are really big, especially if they're standing out by themselves, or, you know, if they're standing out by themselves, like you can get used to it and you can say, okay, that plane is, you know, at that distance going to be so big. But then if you see it like with a bunch of other airplanes or a bunch of other buildings or something like that, then your concept, your perception gets very confused. Okay, so but if you just focus on that one thing, the door, and just remember what a door is supposed to look like to you at different distances, then I think you'll be able to more accurately range estimate buildings, airplanes, and ships. Okay, so hope you guys enjoyed this video. Drop some comments below. Ask me any questions if you got some questions. If you got any of your own ideas for range estimating, let me know. Put in the comments. I'll talk to you all soon.